Welcome back, baseball fans, to 1973-76 Carryover League offseason look. Today we're continuing from last week, looking at potential first-round picks for clubs. We went through 12 teams. We'll look at the next 8 teams tonight, maybe go a little past that. These are the 8 teams that just missed making the playoffs a year ago. From Houston with an 18-21 record to Baltimore with a 22-19 record a year ago. Just missed out. So we will begin with Houston. First thing we do is we look and see existing. Does any of these guys look like a potential first-round pick? By improving them. In the case of Bob Watson, he's already got a very good card in 73, but in 75 it's even better. Don't know. That's in case they have no other viable options, he'd be a fine first-round pick by improving himself, but we're going to be more ambitious. Steve Mangori has a better 76, but probably not first-round material. And Ken Forsch, an intriguing first-round pick because I think in 76 he finally makes the rotation. But I think we probably have better rookies or keepers. So we're just going to go right to the sheet that shows all the players' potential. The 25-60, we're going to look at right at Houston. You know, we know these are all the eligible cards they could take from row 671 all the way down to row 725, plus the rookie classes of 75 and 76. We'll look at those as well. We know, for instance, we talked about Mr. Bob Watson. He's a 312, 852, 75. He's 324, 870. So it is improvement, but okay. Keepers, though, make a little more sense because we have some great Astros here. Cesar Cedeno, Larry Dierker, Johnny Edwards, Doug Rader. Of that list, Cedeno, and check this out, folks. You got to really take a peek here. This is all the Strat-O-Matic E ratings from the 73 through 76 card sets. And talk about Mr. Consistency. They didn't even need him to go into left or right field for 5 minutes. He was just the exclusive center fielder for at least this 4 years and beyond as a 1-4 with various errors, generally low there. But 73, that's probably the year we would go with. 320 with a 913 OPS. That's definitely first-round material. Dierker is a much older player. He's got some nice years, but right now Cedeno is the bar. Johnny Edwards, Doug Rader are just good players, supplemental players. So let's skip all the way to 75 and look at second-year rookies. Second-year rookies who weren't drafted a year ago. With Houston, or we call them year 2 players, that list includes these guys here. Enos Cabell, Cliff Johnson, Skip Jutsi, Tony Scott, Doug Connexy, J.R. Richard, Jose Cruz. Name recognition, Jose Cruz and J.R. Richard just aren't that good yet. We know they will be very good. Cliff Johnson's got an 876 OPS, but he's not as good as Mr. Cedeno. And then when we look at the actual rookie class of 76, there's more guys. Rob Bellore, Cabell, Cruz, Louis Gomez, Jeff Newman, Leon Roberts, Joaquin Andujar, Dan Larson, Gene Pence, and another J.R. Richard. Now this J.R. Richard is actually on the rotation and wins 20 games. 2.75 ERA, 1.27 WHIP. He could be the first-round pick, though I'm probably hedging to making it Cedeno out of respect for his incredible history of work. Also, Jose Cruz. Good to know right now that Jose Cruz and J.R. Richard are finally ready by 1976. So now it's time to pop the cork on those two guys. They've been sitting around in their system. You know, they've been playing in the majors, but just not in my league because they weren't good enough. But now it's time to get these guys on the active Houston roster. If you wait too long, they're gone. So I have a feeling that Richard and Cruz will both be taken off the board before the 4th round, with Cedeno probably the first-round pick. All right, next up, we go back to the order. Cleveland. Cleveland's going to carry along with bunch of guys. Ray Fosse gets better in 76. Cesar Tovar, Tom Hilgendorf, Oscar Gamble. Gamble's the only intriguing one. I'll have to look at that momentarily. Because he always had some wild-looking strat cards, usually in a platoon. With the Yankees, I think with Cleveland, I think with San Diego. So we'll look at Gamble momentarily in 75. Let's go to Cleveland's montage here. To that list, we're going to add Ramon Hernandez, who they acquired in a trade as a left-hander. Gaylord Perry, Fritz Peterson, Dick Tidrow. I got to start with Gaylord Perry first here because I think he's still in his... Gosh, he's 34 to 37 years old. Hard to believe. And he's still throwing 300 innings, 3 of those 4 years, with a bunch of complete games, with whips of 113, 110, 113... 21-game winner in 74. Went to the All-Star game in 74. That's probably the card they would take. Fritz Peterson's getting up there in years. He's just okay. And Dick Tidrow's just okay. So right now I'm thinking Gaylord Perry would be the first pick. But let's take a look at that Oscar Gamble improvement. Oscar. He's 291, 833. In 75, we suggest he's 261, 815. I don't really think that's much of an improvement on bases there. It's probably a prodigious split that makes it opportunistic, but I think this is Gaylord Perry, but we'll look at the rookies just to be on the safe side. Cleveland's year 2 guys are... this group right here. Alan Ashby, Ed Crosby, Dwayne Kuiper, Rick Manning, Jackie Brown, Dennis Eckersley. Got a Hall of Famer in there. Eckersley gets started very nicely with a 13-7, 260 ERA, 127 whip. But not necessarily first-round material. I may want to mention, though, Hall of Famers are always considered to be first-round potential. Not necessarily for the stats they produce, but because of the careers they have. So if the Indians were, say, stuck with a bunch of scrubs, you could just say Dennis Eckersley because he's a Hall of Famer as their first-round pick, even though he's just getting started. Dwayne Kuiper, Rick Manning would be steady Cleveland players. And now let's look at their rookie class of 76. It's Larvell Blanks, Bruce Boctiste, Skip Jutzy. There's Dwayne Kuiper, Rick Manning again, Tommy Smith, Gary Beer, Dennis Eckersley again, Jim Kern, and Rick Waits. Jim Kern becomes a monster reliever. He's actually a monster now. My goodness. 237 ERA and 119 whip. Eckersley's ERA goes up to 343, so he slightly regresses. All said and done, I think Gaylord Perry seems like their first-round pick. Hall of Famer, Gaylord Perry. Hard to call him in his prime when he's 35 years old, but he might be in his prime. All right, next team. The Toronto Blue Jays. Always interesting, these expansion teams who have no history prior to 1977. So Toronto, unfortunately for them, their cast is already considered being in their best cards. Of that list, Hairston's got a 290 card, as does Lum in 294. Sosa's got a sub-3 ERA. Milt May's hitting 290. Ed Cranebill's hitting 323. Jerry Royce is pitching very well. So that's some good talent, but it doesn't get any better. They're at the height of their powers in the timeline given. Let's go now look at the... And this is where it gets kind of lean on these expansion teams, because remember, they're only getting players that other teams left behind. So their 4 keepers are Doyle Alexander, Tim Foley, Bert Hooton, Clyde Wright. Now, Hooton is really intriguing because he leaves Chicago Cubs for the Dodgers, and he's got some nice years here in 75 and 6. This is a nice little interception, you could call it. This is where history, we come into history, and we don't get that seamless... You know, Hooton left the Cubs for the Dodgers, and the Dodgers went to the playoffs with Hooton at the top of that staff. Toronto comes in here because they need players. you know. Hooten's not going to get Toronto to the World Series, but Hooten's going to get Toronto better. 18-game winner in 75. We have Clyde Wright, who's getting older. Doyle Alexander delivers a pretty flat performance. No particular year stands out. So let's look at what is considered their rookie classes. The second-year players from 75. And there's just a couple left. Bob Davis and Dave McKay. They actually did play for Toronto. But in 75, Davis was a Padre and Dave McKay was a Twin. And not very noteworthy performance. And now the Toronto rookie class, they actually gave him a lot of players. And this is because Strat-O-Matic printed a lot of futures cards based on who might be on Toronto. And so they have estimated stats. So actually, I don't even have stats registered here. I just put in dummy numbers here. They are for cards printed out with estimates for Doug Alt, Jose Baez, Bob Baylor, who would play for Toronto. Actually, Alt also plays for Toronto eventually. And John Scott. None of the stats are particularly good, as you can imagine, but they're estimates. Plus Dave Hilton, Ted Kubiak, Jerry Turner, Otto Velez, Ernie Witt, Jerry Garvin, Steve Hargan, Tom Underwood. Underwood is noteworthy because he does pitch for the Blue Jays. However, he's stolen away from the Phillies, who he pitched for in 76. 10-5 with a 3.53 ERA for Philadelphia. Well, that's another. We mentioned Bert Hooten. That's another historic change. Underwood was very much a part of those Philadelphia playoff teams in the mid to late 70s. So Toronto could get him. All said and done, I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be either Bert Hooten or Doyle Alexander, one of the starting pitchers, because the offensive players aren't very good at all. Tim Foley and 3 pitchers. All right, let's keep going. The next team that would be on the clock. Let's see here. After Toronto, it's Colorado Rocky, another expansion team. So Colorado, let's see who they're going to carry on with. Colorado is built upon homers, walks, strikeouts. And they pretty much aren't really in the market for other. They'll take any pitchers that are willing to come. Interesting that one of their pitchers, Al Fitzmaurice, gets much better in 75 and 76, both those years. Rick Monday has a really good 76, and Dave Kingman has a very good 76. That's interesting. I think Kingman's an all-star. So obviously the hitters are going to draw the most attention. Let's look at Colorado's keepers, and then we'll look at the Fitzmaurice and the Monday and Kingman. Colorado's keepers are Dick Drago, Dave Duncan, Joe List, Ron Reed. Ron Reed is just an average starting pitcher, but eventually goes to the bullpen in 76. It is very good in Philadelphia's bullpen. Probably not first-round material. Joe List, one of those homer walk strikeout guys, not first-round material, really. Dave Duncan, Dick Drago, same thing. Let's go look at those improvements for Rick Monday. So Monday presently has a 294, 842 OPS. 76, it's 272, 853 OPS with 32 home runs. Well, that's nice. Kind of a sideways move. It's a slight improvement. If they were desperate, they'd improve Monday. Oh, one other factor here. Monday's defense. He goes from a 1-25. He's a 1-2 E6. People forget how great Rick Monday once was defensively. He was a brilliant defensive player. The other hitter, of course, is Kingman. We presently have Kingman with really his best San Francisco year. 231, 778 OPS. But we're saying in 76, it's 238, 793 OPS with 37 home runs. So it's basically just more plate appearances. I'm not necessarily sure that would be a first-round pick either. How about Al Fitzmaurice? Fitzmaurice just is an ordinary 1.27 whip, 2.83 ERA, But I think he can pitch on 3 days rest in both these years. Did so with Kansas City with 130, 128 whips. Again, another playoff team. We talked about Burt Hooton and the Dodgers. We talked about Tom Underwood and the Phillies. And now Al Fitzmaurice in Kansas City. These are all important fixtures on those teams that went to the playoffs. But now, of course, our league, we've got 6 playoff teams. And we've got expansion. So that's what makes it a lot more fun. Moving the talent around throughout baseball. So teams just don't stockpile talent and leave it on the bench. Everybody gets to play. Next up is the Phillies. Now, the Phillies are going to be pretty rich, as you can imagine, in this timeline. They get improvements from Bob Boone, Gary Maddox, Tim McCarver. We'll skip the catchers and go directly to Maddox because he hits 330 and 76. That's certainly worth a first-round pick. But let's see what else Philadelphia is doing. Let's begin, of course, by looking at Mr. Maddox. So Maddox, with his Giants card, was hitting 319, 810, but he was a 3 in center field. But now we're saying in 76 for the Phillies, he's hitting 330, 833 OPS, and he's a 1 -2 in center field. So bumping up 2 defensive grades is worth a first-round pick. This is the best year of Gary Maddox's career. You may as well get it now and get it for 4 years. It's the 4th year out. That's 4 years of Gary Maddox playing at the height of his powers. That's the secret to the game. Identifying the best career year of a player and getting that card into the league as soon as possible. Gary Maddox most likely be the top player. Steve Carlton, Pat Dobson, Terry Harmon, and Tony Taylor are the rest. Carlton is okay in this timeline, but he's not really anything special. He doesn't have a sub-3 earned run average, so he'll be passed by Maddox. The year 2 players for the Phillies. Let's see here. Larry Christensen, Tom Underwood. So here's a case. If you're wondering about Tom Underwood, yeah, he's got rights under 2 teams. So the 75 card, the rights belong to Philadelphia. The 76 belong to Toronto. It's first come, first serve. Whoever pulls the plug on that player, immediately the other team loses the rights to the player. Unfortunately for the Phillies, Underwood's 75. He's got a 414 earned run average. So they might not be interested in the player anyway. 76 Phillies. That's a playoff year. And we have Rob Andrews, Larry Christensen, John D'Acquisto, Joe Decker, Dan Worthen. Now, I like Christensen. 13-8, 368 ERA. All those other pitchers have +5 ERAs, so not very good for Philadelphia. It's going to be Gary Maddox. Let's keep this moving along. Kansas City, drafting at 18th, is next. Philadelphia and Kansas City will always be connected as the teams that couldn't quite get to the World Series until they both did in 1980. But they had missed through most of the decade. That's all right. Kansas City gets their World Championship in 85. All right, so we're going to look at the Kansas City carry-on guys. They're carrying on. We see Al Cowan's getting better in 75, and a lot of improvement out of Patek, Brett, and Gura. Well, Brett wins a batting title in 76, and that won't be the first time he does it. Patek will get better in 76, but it's not super amazing. Gura in the bullpen in 76 is very good. Al Cowan in 75. Brett would be make most sense. Let's go look at the keepers for Kansas City. I guess we could start with Brett first. Again, a Hall of Famer. They usually get precedence in draft order. That supersedes best player available. So Brett is presently with a 75 card hitting 308. Now he's a 1. He's a 1E25. It's the only time in Brett's career he's a 1. You'd be erasing that. To get Brett into a 2E26 at third base, but he's 333, 839 OPS. And winning the batting title. Your sacrifice one level of defense to get 30 points of batting average. Base stealing, about the same. Actually, I believe he's an ace stealer in 75. Okay, Cowens is a little better in 75 as well. 277, 742. Not really first round material. Now, the keeper list. You have Mayberry, Patton, Lupinello, Splittorff. Mayberry makes a lot of sense as a first round pick because he's got some 30 homer years. Look how steady he was. We saw Cedeno earlier in center. Look at Mayberry at first base. He's a 2 the whole time. Steady player. Steady defense of John Mayberry. He hits 26, 22, 34 home runs. The big years, plural. My goodness, 2 of them. 73, he's got 122 walks, 79 strikeouts, and 895 OPS. But in 75, that's the year you want. You got a 963 OPS. That's better than Brett by like 50 points. So I'm thinking Mayberry and Brett would be 1A and 1B, their first round picks. They'd be in different years, so they'd be selected in different rounds. So it seems pretty much that Mayberry, 75 Mayberry, Brett 76 will be the first and second round picks. And then they could possibly go to their farm system or Al Cowens for their second picks in the years 75 and 76. Here's the second year players for Kansas City in 75. Every time I say second year, year 2, it means 1975. It's Craig Cusick, Frank White, Jim Wolford, Dennis Leonard. All right, Frank White, you're probably wondering about. His defense is not quite there yet. He's still a 3 E22 as a 250 hitter. There's nothing really special about him. He gets much better later in the decade. Jim Wolford's pretty ordinary. And Dennis Leonard's got the name recognition. He pitches 212 innings, but it's a 142 whip. I'm not a big fan of jumping on that immediately. I mean, he could be on the team. He could make the team. But I don't want to take him in the early rounds because that's statistically not that fantastic. Our league is much, of course, more talented than the traditional major league rosters, of which Leonard would have been, a staple. And then you have the 76 rookies: Tom Poquette, John Wathan, Frank White, Dennis Leonard, Mark Littell. So let's see if White and Leonard get any better. Yeah, Frank White is now 2, but he's hitting 229. And Dennis Leonard brings the whip down to 122 as a 17-game winner. So the 76 Leonard makes some sense. I'd go with that. I'm fine with him being the second player picked off of the 76 roster. But he has to compete with Mark Littell, who's a great closer with a 2.08 ERA. And Tom Poquette's a nice corner outfielder hitting 3.02. Or you could not improve Brett, which, yeah, I'm not sure, and go Leonard, Littell, Mayberry. Leonard, Littell, Mayberry, and Cowens, get all those guys, and just leave Brett alone. So that's the fun part of the draft. Do you take the gamble to improve a player? Once you improve a player who's presently on your roster, you haven't added anybody to your team. So that means at the end of the draft, you'll be short a player. And then you have to go onto the street and find your utility infielder, your corner outfielder, backup catcher, long man of the bullpen, swing starter, whatever. Because you elected to improve a player to a year instead of waiting for the chronology to reach the year. You can just wait to 1976 and Brett can just jump into that card. Okay. Next up, Pittsburgh 76. Okay. 73-76 Pirates. Probably better in the earlier years than the latter years for the Pirates. Let's see who they are going to carry on with. Only Dave Parker gets better in 75. And why this is significant is that this is the first year that Clemente is not on the Pirates, because we had his 72 card in the league right up until his untimely tragedy. So now they need an everyday right fielder. The Dave Parker, the card they have in 73, is a part-time player, but he's an everyday player in 75. So he takes up would be basically replacing Parker and Clemente with Parker. So instead of being on the bench a lot of the time, Parker would be your everyday player if you get him into the 75 card. Let's take a look at Pittsburgh's. The rest of your Pirates. So let's start with Parker. So he presently is hitting 288, 761, but only 144 at-bats. 1975. Yeah, he gets MVP votes. He's top 10 MVP votes. He has got a... there it is. 308, 898 OPS. He's a 3-2 E10 right field. That's the best defense in the timeline. Interestingly, Parker regresses in 76 to a 4.16, and he's down on 824 OPS. But then he eventually becomes an MVP in 77 through 79 era. So Parker makes a lot of sense. Now let's look at their keepers. Justy, Hebner, Oliver, and Sanguian. Well, Sanguian's 75 is certainly first-round material. Sanguian's 75, dude, it's 328, 842 with a -2 arm. Wow. That's outstanding. Probably one of the best years of a catcher in the decade, if you're not named Johnny Bench, I suppose. Manny Sanguian. So that's certainly a first-round pick with Parker. Also, Al Oliver is going to make this list in 76. Hitting 323, 839, still playing center and first base. They need him in both spots. He goes back and forth between lefties and righties, and between starting the game and finishing the game defensively at first. Richie Hebner has a little bit of a lull in his career. He was fireworks in the early 70s and the later 70s, but him in the middle, no 300 years here. He's got a 291 year in 74. Dave Justy, still a great closer in 73, but not beyond. We'll look at the rookies, because this is probably a pretty fertile farm system, we believe, without checking. They always were. Of course, it's been rated. So now they have Ken Tekulve and Ted Kubiak. Now, Tekulve, he's got a 2.25 ERA, 117 whip, really loaded versus righties. The lefties are going to knock him around, but he obviously improves that by the time he's the full-time closer by the latter 70s. Here he's a 28-year-old rookie. Submariners usually don't start out submariners, I'm guessing. Then he converted to a submariner at age 28, and he had a dynamite start, but he's susceptible to lefties here. Let's see what happens a year later in the complete rookie class for Pittsburgh of 76. It's not a big one. It's Omar Moreno, Nino Espinosa, and Ken Tekulve. Moreno's defense and center, he's just a 3.16. He's hitting 270, but he's got a lot of walks, something that he would not always have. And Tekulve, his ERA is now 2.45 with a 113 whip. And yes, he's much better against lefties in 76 than in 75. So those players could be taken, but probably not in the first round. I'm still leaning to either Dave Parker or Manny Sanguian. One of those guys will most likely be the Pirates' first-round pick. And next up, we'll stop with Baltimore. Baltimore, Team 20. They just missed the playoffs with a 22-19 record. They are starting their fall from grace from the dynasty, 69-71. They get into a little bit of a lull in the mid-70s, then they pick it up in the latter 70s as they transition, pretty much replace their entire pitching staff by the latter 70s, adding the McGregors and Flanagans and the Tippy Martinez guys like that, and they get back to a couple World Series. So let's take a look at Baltimore's carry-on players. Of this list, Wayne Garland in 76 and Mark Belanger in 76 show improvement. And frankly, yeah, it is. Belanger, believe it or not, his best offensive year is 76. He gets 270. He goes to the All-Star game. Wayne Garland has the best year of his career. He wins 20 games. So this didn't happen very long for these players. They would regress. So it makes sense for Baltimore to get the players into these cards. Whether they do it in the first round or in this draft at all remains to be seen. Let's see who Baltimore also has to keep. Okay, you got Mike Cuellar, Lee May, Eddie Watt, Earl Williams. By name recognition, Cuellar, he's getting up there in years, but he has 3 nice years here, the first 3. He's a 22-game winner in 74. That seems to be the best year here with a 1.25 whip. Only 76 is a poor year for him. Lee May, you've got some good Houston statistics and some okay Baltimore statistics. He doesn't have an 800 OPS. I don't think it's first-round material. And Eddie Watt, Earl Williams isn't first-round material either. So right now it's looking like Cuellar or possibly Belanger or Garland. Unless we can find something out of their farm system. Let's look at the year 2 rookies for Baltimore now. They should have some guys here. It's Rick Dempsey, Billy Smith, Tippy Martinez, Paul Mitchell, Tom Chopay. Dempsey's a +2 arm catcher. Tippy Martinez, he's got a 2.68 ERA, but his whip is 1.59. He's really good against lefties, but he's very vulnerable to righties. So probably not either of those. And then let's look and see what's on their rookie class list of 76. It's Rick Dempsey, Andre Moore, Steve Dunning, Mike Flanagan, Dave Haverlow, Tippy Martinez, and Scott McGregor. Let's start with Tippy. So he's got a 2.59 ERA. The whip is a little bit better at 1.44, but nothing's flashy. McGregor's is 1.55. Flanagan's is 1.36. Rick Dempsey, he's got a -1 arm. So again, you're seeing, like I said, Baltimore's not particularly fantastic in the middle 70s here. Frankly, Belanger as a 1 shortstop, you know, if he goes from being a 200 Mendoza line hitter to 270, that's pretty significant. It seems to lack convention, you know, but Mark Belanger could be their first-round pick. And before you scoff at that notion, Ed Brinkman got top 10 MVP votes in 1972 for the Tigers and hit just 203. But he was an amazing defensive shortstop in that season, and the Tigers won the division. So Belanger presently is hitting 226. He's a 1E24. In 76, Belanger's a 270 hitter, and he's a 1E14. So you're shaving off 10 of 24 errors. I kind of like the defensive part of that. I mean, if it was flipped the other way, like say he made 10 more errors, I might hedge. But he's making 10 fewer errors. He's going from his 73 card to a 4-year contract. I think I'm just going to jump on that 76 Belanger card. Seems peculiar, but it's mostly because the Orioles aren't very good right now. And it frankly doesn't really matter that much. I think the first, second, third round picks, when you consider best player available, it's very subjective. You're comparing a shortstop to a starting pitcher, you know, and how to weight that and so forth. I mean, for instance, another consideration here, Lee May leads the American League in RBI in 1976. But it's not that great a performance. I mean, 258, 759 OPS. There really isn't anything special about that. Somebody had to lead the league in RBI, and I guess a lot of Orioles were on base when he swung, so not trying to disparage him, but yeah. RBIs and wins by pitchers are 2 stats I just can't trust. So yeah, that'd be pretty interesting to have. Pretty fun. I think I might just do Belanger. Oh, Wayne Garland was the other guy. Yeah, he was a reliever with a 103 whip. Wow. And now as a starter in 76, Wayne Garland, 20-7, 267 ERA, and a 124 whip. The big deal is he goes from a relief starter to a guy who can pitch on 3 days rest. Again, wins though. The whip actually gets worse. As a reliever, it was 103. Now it's 124 to start. So that's what you're weighing and doing that. Yeah, folks, after doing a deep dive into Baltimore, I'm thinking Belander looks pretty damn good right now as their first round pick. All right, that's it tonight, folks. We're going to stop right there with 20 teams looked at for potential first round picks. Hope you're enjoying this kind of analysis, and we'll see you next week.